Welcome to Histology Hub. Drumroll. From the crack of Revolutionary War muskets, musket shot, to the roar of modern tanks and missiles, explosion. The U.S. Army's weapons have shaped history. Today, we uncover their incredible evolution. The story of the United States Army begins not in a grand hall or a fortress, but on the muddy fields and in the forested hills of the American colonies. It was the year 1775, and the winds of revolution were stirring. The men who gathered were not professional soldiers. They were farmers, blacksmiths, merchants, and scholars. They came from 13 different colonies, each with its own identity, its own way of life. But, they were united by a powerful idea, a dream of liberty. On June 14th, the Continental Congress voted to create a Continental Army, a single force to stand against the mightiest military power on earth, the British Empire. This was a monumental step, a declaration that they were no longer just scattered militias, but one people with one cause. Their first commander was a Virginian planter named George Washington. He was a man of great resolve, a man who understood the monumental task that lay before him. The army he inherited was a collection of determined but poorly equipped volunteers. Their weapons were a patchwork assortment of firearms. Most carried the smoothbore flintlock musket, often their own personal hunting weapon. This gun was slow to load, inaccurate at any real distance, and unreliable in wet weather. A soldier was lucky to get off 3 shots in a single minute. It was a weapon that demanded discipline and courage, forcing soldiers to stand in tight formations, shoulder to shoulder, to deliver a volley of fire that might, with luck, break an enemy charge. Alongside the musket, the bayonet was a crucial tool of war. It was a long, sharp blade that could be fixed to the end of the musket barrel, turning the firearm into a deadly spear. In the chaos of close-quarters combat, after the initial volleys of smoke and lead had been exchanged, the bayonet charge often decided the outcome of a battle. Cannons, too, played their part. These heavy iron beasts were slow and difficult to move, pulled by teams of horses or oxen. They fired solid iron cannonballs that could smash through enemy lines or bounce across a battlefield, causing terrible destruction. Artillerymen were specialized soldiers, and their skill could turn the tide of an engagement, as they did at the pivotal Battle of Saratoga. The struggle was long and arduous. The Continental Army faced incredible hardship, from the brutal winter at Valley Forge to the constant shortages of food, clothing, and ammunition. Yet, they endured. They learned from their defeats and grew stronger with each small victory. They learned the art of war on the fly, transforming from a ragtag militia into a disciplined fighting force. The support of foreign allies like the French brought much-needed supplies, training, and professional soldiers. The final victory at Yorktown was a testament not to superior technology, but to sheer persistence, brilliant leadership, and the unyielding spirit of an army born from a revolution. Nearly a century after its founding, the nation faced its greatest test. The United States was torn in two by the Civil War, a conflict that pitted brother against brother. The U.S. Army, now called the Union Army, fought to preserve the nation. This war would become a brutal, bloody crucible, a testing ground for new ideas and new technologies that would forever change the face of battle. The soldiers who marched off to war in 1861 looked much like their revolutionary grandfathers, but the weapons they carried were undergoing a profound and deadly transformation. The age of the smoothbore musket was coming to a close, and the era of the rifle had begun. The key innovation was the rifled musket. Unlike the smoothbore, the inside of the rifle's barrel had spiral grooves cut into it. These grooves spun the bullet as it left the barrel, making it far more accurate and giving it a much greater range. A soldier with a standard Springfield or Enfield rifle could now reliably hit a target from hundreds of yards away, a distance that was unimaginable just a generation earlier. This single change had a devastating impact on the battlefield. The old tactics of marching in dense formations toward the enemy became suicidal. Generals who were slow to understand this new reality sent thousands of men to their deaths in futile charges against well-entrenched riflemen. Another deadly innovation was the mini ball, a cone-shaped lead bullet that was smaller than the barrel's diameter, making it easy to load, but which expanded upon firing to grip the rifling. This solved the slow-loading problem of earlier rifles and made the rifled musket the standard infantry weapon of the war. The result was carnage on an industrial scale. Battles like Antietam and Gettysburg produced casualty numbers that staggered the nation. The rifle turned the battlefield into a vast killing zone, where soldiers spent more time digging trenches and building breastworks for protection than they did marching in the open field. It was a grim preview of the trench warfare that would dominate World War I. Artillery also saw significant advances. Cannons were now rifled as well, allowing them to fire explosive shells with greater accuracy and over longer distances. The new 12-pounder Napoleon cannon was a versatile workhorse, capable of firing solid shot, explosive shells, and deadly canister rounds that turned the cannon into a giant shotgun at close range. The war also saw the first primitive machine guns, like the Gatling gun, which could fire hundreds of rounds per minute. Though used in limited numbers, these weapons hinted at a future where firepower would be measured not in single shots, but in a continuous stream of bullets, forever altering the balance between offense and defense. When the United States entered the Great War in 1917, it sent its soldiers, known as doughboys, into a hellish landscape unlike any seen before. The battlefields of Europe were a maze of trenches, barbed wire, and shell-pocked mud. This was a new kind of war, a static war of attrition where progress was measured in feet, not miles, and the cost was paid in an endless river of human lives. The rifle, which had been the king of the Civil War battlefield, was now just one part of a symphony of destruction. The dominant instrument of this war, the weapon that defined its character, was the machine gun. The machine gun had been perfected since the days of the Gatling gun. Weapons like the German Maxim gun and the American Browning M1917 could fire over 600 rounds a minute, creating an almost impenetrable wall of lead. A few well-placed machine gun nests could hold off an entire battalion of attacking infantry. This defensive power forced both sides to dig into the earth for survival, creating the vast networks of trenches that stretched for hundreds of miles across the Western Front. Life in the trenches was miserable, a constant struggle against mud, rats, disease, and the ever-present fear of an artillery barrage or a sudden enemy raid. The order to go over the top and charge across no man's land was a virtual death sentence for thousands. To break the stalemate of the trenches, armies turned to ever more powerful artillery. World War I was a war of cannons. Huge railroad guns could lob massive shells weighing nearly a ton over miles, obliterating entire sections of the front line. The constant, thunderous roar of artillery fire was the soundtrack of the war. Before any major offensive, a massive barrage would pound the enemy lines for days, churning the earth and shattering nerves. Armies also unleashed a terrifying new weapon poison gas. Chlorine, phosgene, and mustard gas were used to choke, blind, and burn soldiers in their trenches, adding a new layer of horror to the conflict and forcing soldiers to carry clumsy gas masks at all times. It was in this brutal environment that the U.S. Army first encountered the tank. Invented by the British, the tank was a heavily armored vehicle that moved on caterpillar tracks, designed to crush barbed wire and cross trenches while protecting its crew from machine gun fire. The first tanks were slow, clumsy, and mechanically unreliable, but they represented the future. They were a direct answer to the dominance of the trench and the machine gun. The United States produced its own tanks like the M1917, a copy of a French design. Though they arrived too late to have a decisive impact, the potential of armored warfare was clear. The age of the horse cavalry was over. The age of the machine had arrived. When war clouds gathered again over Europe 2 decades later, the U.S. Army had learned the lessons of World War I. The Second World War was a conflict of unprecedented scale and speed, a global struggle that would be won not just by courage, but by industrial might and technological innovation. The United States became the arsenal of democracy, producing a staggering quantity of weapons and equipment that armed not only its own soldiers but its allies as well. The foot soldier, the GI, remained the backbone of the army, but the tools he used were vastly more powerful and more varied than those of his father's generation. The standard infantryman was now armed with the M1 Garand rifle. It was a rugged and reliable semi-automatic weapon, which meant that after firing a shot, it automatically loaded the next round. General George S. Patton called it the greatest battle implement ever devised. It gave the American soldier a significant firepower advantage over his German and Japanese counterparts, who were still largely equipped with slower bolt-action rifles. For close-quarters combat, soldiers had the Thompson submachine gun, the Tommy gun, and the M3 grease gun, which could spray a high volume of pistol-caliber bullets. The Browning automatic rifle, or BAR, served as a squad's light machine gun, providing crucial mobile firepower. This war was defined by movement and combined arms, a stark contrast to the static trenches of the previous conflict. The tank, which had been a novelty in World War I, was now a decisive weapon. The U.S. Army fielded thousands of M4 Sherman tanks. While not always a match for the heavier German Panther and Tiger tanks in a one-on-one fight, the Sherman was reliable, easy to produce, and available in overwhelming numbers. Armored divisions combining tanks, armored infantry, and self-propelled artillery spearheaded the blitzkrieg style of warfare. The half-track and the iconic Jeep gave the Army unprecedented mobility, allowing it to move troops and supplies rapidly across the battlefield. Air power came of age in World War II and became a co-equal partner with the forces on the ground. The U.S. Army Air Forces flew legendary aircraft that controlled the skies. Fighters like the P-51 Mustang escorted bombers deep into enemy territory, sweeping enemy fighters from the air. Bombers like the B-17 Flying Fortress and the B-24 Liberator conducted massive strategic bombing campaigns that crippled the enemy's industrial capacity to wage war. On the tactical level, fighter bombers like the P-47 Thunderbolt acted as flying artillery, attacking tanks, trains, and troop concentrations in direct support of ground troops, a deadly partnership that was crucial to victory from the beaches of Normandy to the islands of the Pacific. The end of World War II did not bring lasting peace. Instead, it gave way to, well, a new kind of global struggle, the Cold War. This was a long, tense standoff between the United States and the Soviet Union, two superpowers with, totally opposing ideologies. For the U.S. Army, this era was defined by a dual mission. It had to be prepared to fight a massive conventional war against the Soviet Army on the plains of Europe, while also grappling with the terrifying new reality of nuclear weapons. The atomic bombs that ended the war with Japan had cast a long shadow over all military planning, creating a world where total annihilation was just a button push away. The development of nuclear weapons fundamentally changed the nature of warfare. The Army created new types of artillery shells, and even a shoulder-fired rocket, the Davy Crockett, that could deliver a small nuclear warhead. The idea was to use these tactical nuclear weapons on the battlefield to stop a massive Soviet tank invasion. This created a frighteningly low threshold for nuclear war, a scenario where, honestly, a local conflict could quickly escalate into a global catastrophe. The entire strategy of the period was based on deterrence, the idea that the threat of mutually assured destruction would prevent either side from starting a major war. This led to an arms race of unprecedented scale, as both sides built up vast arsenals of intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, capable of striking any target on the planet. While preparing for a potential World War III, the U.S. Army was also fighting actual hot wars on the periphery of the Cold War. The Korean War from 1950 to 1953 was a brutal conventional conflict. It began with jet versus jet air combat and saw the first widespread use of another transformative technology, the helicopter. Initially used for medical evacuation or medevac, helicopters like the Bell H-13 Sioux saved countless lives by quickly transporting wounded soldiers from the front lines to MASH, or Mobile Army Surgical Hospital units. This success demonstrated the helicopter's potential, not just for rescue but for moving troops and supplies over difficult terrain, bypassing enemy defenses. This period also saw the Army become a permanently large, professional, and forward-deployed force. Huge American bases were established in West Germany, South Korea, and Japan, standing as a visible line of defense against communist expansion. The Army's equipment continued to evolve. The M1 Garand was replaced by the M14 rifle, which offered a fully automatic capability. A new generation of tanks, the Patton series, was developed to counter the latest Soviet designs. The entire structure of the Army was reorganized to be more mobile and flexible, ready to fight anywhere in the world on short notice, under the constant, terrifying shadow of the mushroom cloud. The conflict in Vietnam was unlike any war the U.S. Army had ever fought. There were no clear front lines, no massive tank battles on open plains. Instead, the battlefield was the dense, sweltering jungle, the rice paddies, and the small villages of South Vietnam. The enemy, the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese Army, did not wear traditional uniforms, and often blended in with the local population. They were, honestly, masters of guerrilla warfare, using ambushes, booby traps, and hidden tunnel complexes to fight a war of endurance. This new type of conflict demanded new tactics, new strategies, and a new generation of weapons designed for a counterinsurgency fight. The helicopter truly came into its own in Vietnam. The jungle terrain made ground transportation slow and dangerous, so the Army turned to the air. The UH-1 Huey became the symbol of the war, a workhorse that performed countless roles. It was a troop transport, ferrying soldiers into hot landing zones in a new tactic called air assault. It was a medical evacuation bird, a dust-off, continuing the life-saving legacy started in Korea. And it was a gunship, armed with machine guns and rockets, providing close air support for the troops on the ground. The helicopter gave the Army unprecedented mobility, the ability to strike deep within enemy territory, but it could not solve the fundamental political and strategic challenges of the war. The standard rifle of the American soldier also changed dramatically. The heavy M14 rifle, designed for long-range European battles, was ill-suited for the close-quarters combat of the jungle. It was replaced by the M16. This new rifle was made of lightweight plastic and aluminum, and it fired a smaller, high-velocity round. It was lighter, allowing soldiers to carry more ammunition, and its fully automatic capability was devastating in an ambush. However, early versions of the M16 were plagued with reliability problems in the harsh, humid environment, leading to tragic failures in combat. It was a difficult lesson in the importance of testing and refining equipment for the specific conditions of the battlefield. The nature of the enemy forced the Army to adopt other new technologies. Agent Orange, a powerful herbicide, was sprayed from the air to clear away the dense jungle canopy that hid enemy movements. While effective in the short term, its use had devastating and long-lasting environmental and health consequences. The war also saw the increased use of sophisticated sensors, night vision devices, and electronic warfare to try and locate an elusive enemy. Despite this technological superiority, the war in Vietnam ended in frustration and withdrawal. It taught the Army a painful lesson that superior firepower and technology alone cannot guarantee victory in a war for the hearts and minds of a population. After the difficult years following Vietnam, the U.S. Army underwent a period of intense reform and technological advancement. It focused on rebuilding its strength for a potential conflict with the Soviet Union, developing a new generation of weapons known as the Big Five. These systems were designed to be the best in the world, and they would get their first major test in the sands of the Middle East. In 1991, following Iraq's invasion of Kuwait, the United States led a massive coalition in Operation Desert Storm. This war was a stunning display of the Army's new capabilities, a conflict that looked and felt completely different from any that had come before. It was really the dawn of the digital battlefield. The star of the ground war was the M1 Abrams main battle tank. This powerful vehicle was a technological leap beyond its predecessors. It featured advanced composite armor, a powerful gas turbine engine that allowed it to move at incredible speeds, and a sophisticated fire control system. This system allowed the tank's gunner to aim and fire with uncanny accuracy, even while the tank was moving at high speed across the rough desert terrain. Coupled with advanced thermal sights that could see through darkness, smoke, and sandstorms, the Abrams crews could identify and destroy enemy tanks from miles away, long before the Iraqi crews even knew they were being targeted. The Abrams was joined by the M2 Bradley fighting vehicle, an armored transport that could carry infantrymen into battle while providing heavy firepower with its cannon and anti-tank missiles. In the air, the AH-64 Apache attack helicopter proved to be a revolutionary tank killer. Armed with Hellfire missiles and a powerful 30mm cannon, the Apache's pilots used advanced night vision and targeting systems to hunt and destroy Iraqi armor with ruthless efficiency, often operating deep behind enemy lines. The Apache and the Abrams worked together as a deadly team, a modern version of cavalry and infantry, completely overwhelming the older Soviet-made Iraqi equipment. Perhaps the most significant innovation was the widespread use of the Global Positioning System, or GPS. For the first time, individual soldiers, vehicles, and commanders knew their exact location on the planet at all times. This allowed for incredibly precise navigation across the vast, featureless desert, enabling the famous left hook maneuver that flanked the entire Iraqi army. Smart weapons also played a key role. Precision-guided munitions like laser-guided bombs and missiles could strike specific targets with minimal collateral damage. Desert Storm was a short, decisive war that showcased the power of technology, speed, and information, setting the standard for military operations for decades to come. The attacks of September 11, 2001, thrust the U.S. Army into a new and complex era of conflict. The enemy was not a nation-state with a conventional army, but a global network of extremists who used terror as their primary weapon. The subsequent wars in Afghanistan and Iraq became long, grueling campaigns defined by asymmetric warfare. This meant that the army, with all its technological might, was fighting insurgents who used improvised explosive devices, suicide attacks, and guerrilla tactics. Once again, the army had to adapt, developing new equipment, new training, and new strategies to fight an enemy that blended into the civilian population. The IED became the signature weapon of these conflicts, a constant and deadly threat to soldiers on patrol. These homemade bombs, often hidden on roadsides, were responsible for a large percentage of coalition casualties. In response, the Army rapidly developed and deployed a new class of vehicles: mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicles, or MRAPs. These massive, heavily armored trucks were designed with V-shaped hulls that deflected the blast of an IED away from the crew compartment. While cumbersome and not ideal for all situations, MRAPs saved thousands of lives and represented a rapid adaptation to a lethal threat on the modern battlefield. Another key technology that flourished in this era was the unmanned aerial vehicle, or UAV, commonly known as a drone. Aircraft like the Predator and Reaper could loiter over a battlefield for hours, providing real-time video surveillance to commanders on the ground. This persistent eye in the sky was invaluable for tracking enemy movements, identifying IED emplacements, and providing overwatch for patrols. These drones were also armed with precision-guided missiles, allowing them to strike targets with incredible accuracy from thousands of miles away, controlled by operators sitting safely in bases back in the United States. This remote warfare capability raised new and complex ethical questions, but became an indispensable tool. The individual soldier also became a highly connected digital hub. Soldiers were equipped with advanced body armor, night vision goggles, and sophisticated communication systems that linked them to their squad, their commanders, and to the drones overhead. This network-centric warfare aimed to give even the lowest-level soldier unprecedented situational awareness. Special operations forces, with their specialized training and equipment, played an outsized role in these conflicts, conducting raids and intelligence-gathering missions. The war on terror proved that even in the 21st century, the ultimate weapon is a well-trained, adaptable soldier, supported by technology that can respond to the ever-changing character of war. As of today, September 15, 2025, the United States Army stands at another pivotal moment in its long history. The era of large-scale counterinsurgency campaigns in the Middle East has wound down, and the Army's focus is shifting. It is now preparing for a future of great power competition, a potential conflict with near-peer adversaries like Russia or China, who possess sophisticated and technologically advanced militaries. This new challenge requires a profound modernization of the force, moving beyond the systems that won the Cold War and the War on Terror, and investing in a new generation of weapons and technologies for a more lethal and complex battlefield. The Army is in the midst of a massive modernization effort, focused on what it calls its 6 priorities. This includes developing next-generation combat vehicles to eventually replace the Abrams and Bradley, and a new family of helicopters under the Future Vertical Lift program, designed to fly faster, farther, and with greater capabilities than the current Black Hawk and Apache. A top priority is long-range precision fires, the development of new cannons and missiles that can strike targets from hundreds or even thousands of miles away. This is seen as essential to counter the advanced air defense systems of potential rivals, ensuring that the Army can fight and win from a distance. The digital domain is now considered as important as land, sea, and air. The Army is heavily investing in its network, artificial intelligence, and cyber warfare capabilities. The goal is to connect every soldier, vehicle, and sensor into a single, seamless web of data. This will allow for faster decision-making, autonomous systems that can assist soldiers, and the ability to defend against and attack enemy computer networks. Future soldiers will operate in an environment rich with information, using augmented reality displays to see data overlaid on their real-world view, giving them a level of battlefield awareness that was once the stuff of science fiction. From the flintlock musket of the Continental soldier to the networked systems of today, the evolution of the U.S. Army's weapons tells the story of the nation itself. It is a story of adaptation, innovation, and the constant search for an edge in a dangerous world. The soldiers of today carry on the legacy of those who stood at Saratoga, Gettysburg, and Normandy. They are part of an unbroken chain, a force that has been shaped by its past and is now preparing for the unknowns of the future. The army of tomorrow will be faster, smarter, and more lethal, but its core strength will remain what it has always been: the courage, skill, and dedication of the American soldier.